And we're rolling. Hey, this is Mark Goldberg with the UN Affairs blog UN Dispatch.
Sure, and this is Matthew Lee from Inner City Press at the United Nations.
So Matthew, you just got back from a press stakeout regarding the situation in Burma, right?
Sure. We call it Myanmar over here, but
pardon me, Myanmar.
No problem.
Yeah.
Some people say both, and that's probably the more correct way. Like, Myanmar, also known as Burma, or Burma, also known as Myanmar. The problem that they're having here is actually deciding, and even Ban Ki-moon has this problem, how to describe the people that live in Myanmar. Are they Myanmese? Are they Myanmarese? Are they Myanmarians? Nobody knows.
Well, on my blog post on the situation this morning, I just said Myanmar/Burma.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very Bolton-like of you. Very Bolton-like.
There you go.
Bolton always said, Myanmar, known in this country as Burma.
Mm-hmm.
The Brits call it Burma, but
big to do. This is going to have to be a short vlog today. So let's jump right into it.
Please. Keep us focused.
The situation in Myanmar, Burma is
very serious,
raising the question and the specter that the Security Council might invoke the principle of responsibility to protect. You want to explain to our viewers what that is?
Sure, I will. In 2005, according to the French, the concept was invented by Bernard Kouchner, their current foreign minister.
Well,
that's what they said yesterday.
I think the Canadians might dispute that.
I know. I thought so too. Yeah. Maybe we can get an intra. They can go at it. But as regards the UN, in 2005, they managed to pass this very high-minded and very very forward-looking concept, which is that it's a two-pronged thing. It's that governments have a duty a responsibility to protect their own people, but the sort of the juice of it all is that if a government either cannot or will not, then the international community has an affirmative duty to intervene, take steps to protect. And everyone goes out of their way to point out that military intervention is the absolute last in a series of options, but it's sort of I guess when I think about it, it takes like the Genocide Convention, which says that parties to the convention have a duty to intervene to stop genocide, and it applies it to three other crimes, which are, and it is limited to these four, by the way: genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, or ethnic cleansing. And it said that's what the GA passed, is that if these four things are going on and the government at issue can't or won't stop it, the international community can and in fact must go in.
Yeah, so it's all about sort of eroding this idea of that sort of sovereignty is a barrier to intervention. If presumably the Security Council says the situation merits invoking responsibility to protect.
Correct.
And this is all a preamble to the fact that Bernard Kouchner, the French foreign minister, yesterday, I should say this week, on Tuesday, raised the idea that perhaps we should invoke responsibility to protect as a way to overcome the sort of military junta in Burma's obstructionism of UN aid and aid workers and food relief.
Not to be a cynic, I think this is what over here he said France will today seek in the Security Council to invoke the responsibility to protect and go in and help these people. And it sounded good, and then when you actually saw what France actually introduced in the Security Council, number one, not to be again without any. People are. It's a terrible situation there, and so everything is being tried to try to get aid in. But we'll go back to the actual situation on the ground. But in terms of what happened at the council, there was absolutely no chance of that flying. Before Kouchner said it, while he said it, after it, and I have to believe that they knew it wouldn't fly. Number one, because just technically it doesn't fall into the definition of what they managed to pass at the UN of when you can invoke it. And number two, it wasn't just. Many people like to say it was just China or just Russia. Definitely a majority of Security Council members not only said it is a total non-starter to invoke responsibility to protect, and their point is it's a natural disaster. They also say give it more time. I can understand how, the average person in the street might say, I see on CNN, people without any help whatsoever. Why can't they do something? But literally, in terms of how the Security Council and the UN works, it was never going to fly. In fact, the France asked. The only thing they asked for, they didn't even ask for they call it RTP. They didn't even ask for a resolution. They didn't introduce any resolution. All they asked for was to have humanitarian coordinator John Holmes come and give a briefing in the Security Council.
Yeah,
and even that was shot down.
Well, incidentally, John Holmes sort of briefed the press. I don't know if you were at that.
I was at that briefing.
He said mounting an invasion of Burma at this point doesn't sound too sensible.
But you know what? He changed his tune today. Yesterday, he's done two press conferences so far. Well, there have been three by OCHA. We'll go totally inside baseball. The first one wasn't him, but it was the head of OCHA New York.
And OCHA is sort of the top humanitarian
it stands for
distribution.
Office
agency.
of the for the coordination of humanitarian affairs. And the dark humor joke here Tuesday was who took the C out of OCHA, meaning they weren't coordinating. They said things like, "We don't have visas yet, but the embassy, the Burmese embassy in Bangkok was closed, so we haven't asked yet." And people wondered, like, wait a second, like people are dying, and you're like not making a call to try to, get the visa application in. So. But then,
right. They were. I mean, Ban Ki-moon sort of, made like a big public statement, and they, I presumably was working behind the scenes as well. And the problem is this terrible dictatorship is not letting foreigners into the country. They're not granting them visas. They're not letting planes off the tarmac.
They've allowed in. One thing. There's no question.
Their own people.
Right. I mean, the only thing I can I'll rather than say what I think, I'll tell you the things that have been. Number one thing that emerged today is that, and I just say this because you may not, if you just watch CNN and even BBC, you may not see this. Like the Chinese ambassador on the way into the council today said, they've flown in a number of planes. They have regular flights to Yangon. That doesn't mean that it's enough. But I think it's interesting that I asked the French ambassador. He said, only 2 planes have gotten in. It's an outrage. So I said, well, are you counting the Chinese planes? And he's like, I'm not aware of them. So I think that there is, maybe I've been accused of going native here, but I want to say that there are more countries on earth than just France, the UK, and the United States. Meaning India, for whatever reason, has sent 2 shiploads of aid. Now, ironically, India hasn't sought any publicity for that. And we can get into why geopolitically they think it's better to do it quietly. And I'm not saying it's enough, but it is interesting. It's sort of, there's a perception, and I'm not saying that Burma has any right to pick and choose whose assistance to accept.
Right.
Right?
I guess, but part of the problem is that sort of, when disaster like this strikes, the UN and the UN agencies have sort of a tried and true method of dealing with the disaster. They've kind of done this before, they've experienced, and part of that method is having this sort of interagency coordinating team sort of on the ground, coordinating and managing things. Sure. But these the members of this team can't get visas. Actually, I think they
let in the ones who are from ASEAN.
Yeah, they let in some, but there's one Western guy or a woman who they're not letting in.
That's correct. There was a team of 5 from OCHA. No, and again, we can. I guess we could also say in the whole, whether or not they're right. If the goal here is to deliver assistance to the suffering Burmese people, does the UN OCHA not have? Not have Asian personnel to send, and then you can later debate all you want about the right of the Swiss or whatever it is to go in there. I just wonder. I think what some people here say, there's 2 different things, and I don't want to by saying what all sides, including France. That's why I wanted to highlight it. It may come off that a country like France is more committed to the Burmese people than anyone else on earth, but in fact, much of what they say here is very political too. They're running for a seat on the Human Rights Council. They're making promises that they know could never take place, not in order to shame anyone into doing anything, only to look like they are the heroes. And I think that it's revealing one thing, which is that even that UN OCHA, the fact that they are unaware of and are not counting planes flown in by China, ships brought in by India, may show you that even the United Nations' own humanitarian machinery is essentially it's a Western. I don't know. They don't seem to be in touch. Maybe the Asians are late to get into the whole humanitarian industry, whatever. But they're there now, and so it seems like a coordinator would know about that.
I think they're there because they're the only people that the junta is letting into the country.
No, but they're
not letting in. There have been offers from other countries, and they're just not letting them in. They're not letting Western aid and Western aid workers into the country.
No, I know, and I know that most of our viewers, I'm sure, are going to say that's an outrage. It's 100%. It's a black and white case. Well, first of all, if everything, because you usually will say, well, maybe you don't say that. I hear a lot of people here like, let's be practical and get the job done. In this case, like literally, I'm sure within OCHA, they know now that the Burmese government's position is that people that have come from ASEAN countries can come in without a visa, no problem. So if I were the UN, I would get in as many experts as I have that are from ASEAN, just to get them on the ground, right?
Well, sure, but the whole point is like this idea of sort of having like a rapid reaction to natural disasters means that you have certain people in place. That person could be Canadian, and they shouldn't be denied
but two questions.
doing their job.
Did it not dawn on the UN? Did it not dawn on the UN that if a disaster struck in Myanmar, there might be a problem getting these people in? And number two, and I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that we touch all the bases here. After the tsunami, there was much noise made at the UN about an early warning system. I've gone to briefings by John Holmes about it. I've seen funds raised for it. I'm not saying there's anything been improper, but I think it's an entirely a fair question to say, where was the system, right? Okay, not to blame anyone. Let's talk about the next tragedy. What steps were taken after the tsunami to ensure that, because there's countries even poorer than Myanmar. Not many of them, but there's a few. We could talk Laos. We could, you know what I mean? Like what steps? I don't know. People thought that there was this emerging network of weather sensing, right?
So, I just want to get back to your first point, though. So are you saying the UN should have created a sort of contingency emergency relief force just for Burma, in the sort of contingency that disaster struck Burma, as opposed to, say, neighboring Laos, where anyone could go in?
Right. No, I'm just saying they war game things out. You think up there. I'm not saying that you have an already printed out, plan. Okay, if it hits Burma, we send these people. If it hits Laos, we send these people. But it's not. It's not. I guess here's what I'll just say this: that there. I am sure within OCHA, as we speak, right? They're always talking about national staff and being as diverse as the world, etc. Given that, close to 2/3 of people on Earth are from Asia, if not ASEAN, I'm not saying that it's acceptable for a country to say we won't take Western aid workers. I'm just saying there's a lot of non-Western aid workers. And one thing, I guess I'm just throwing it out there as something on the horizon, is that eventually, I didn't say that China and India are there because they're the only ones that dictators would let in. I'm saying these are countries that are growing into a role, and ideally, going forward, the world, the humanitarian, when we say the international community or the humanitarian community, it's not just going to be Westerners, right? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't a good thing be that, in fact, a country like China, which, despite having its own internal problems, as so many countries do, and I don't mean human rights, I'm talking about poverty and stuff, they can provide aid, right? Look what they're doing in Africa. People like it or they don't like it, but they're clearly a player. So I think, by the same token, it's sort of amazing that the humanitarian professionals, whether it's Ambassador Repair of France or John Holmes, are entirely unaware that under the radar, so to speak, or certainly by direct flights, some aid is being delivered from China. It is. Mm-hmm. I'm not a defender of China. I'm just saying this has happened, and it didn't even show up in the map they were presenting.
Mm-hmm. I guess maybe the broader question might be sort of if sort of the UN as an organization is slow to shift to sort of the emerging geopolitical realities, that sort of China and India are becoming bigger players on the world stage. There's probably, I think, an inertia.
There we go. No, I think
that's against that. A lot of the UN agencies are probably still dominated by Europeans and Americans because we were the sort of the old powers that created the institution.
No, exactly.
And now you have you have these new powers emerging, and I think it's probably a lot of different sort of agencies or things around the world, it's kind of slow to wake up to this reality.
And that's all I'm doing. I guess I'm highlighting. There's one aspect of this which is highlighting that. That's not at all to say that General Than Shwe is not a ruthless dictator, et cetera, et cetera. But I do. First of all, the UN, you always hear this stuff about practicality. So in fact, if these countries are willing and able to send stuff in, and I think there is, I don't know, I talked to a lot of people, and there's a kind of literally, France's move yesterday was viewed with disfavor and ridicule by many countries. And not because they don't care about people or don't even believe in some cases in responsibility to protect. They just saw it as kind of Western grandstanding. It's like there's two different games going on at the UN, Yeah. And Holmes, I have to say this for Holmes. Holmes, yesterday, and I didn't mean to micro-review his performances, but, they've brought him to do press conferences both days, and I think tomorrow he's going to do a flash appeal, and that's very concrete. That'll be shown on TV, and he'll be saying, on real TV, not just UN TV, and he'll be saying, please give money for this emergency. But I think that they brought him out 2 days in a row because they realized, to get into it, right? Jan Egeland was the previous head of OCHA. He became very well known during the tsunami. He was willing to point fingers and say the Western countries are being, stingy. Mm-hmm. He was sort of a face of the UN, right? I think there were some people that were like, OCHA's not, we're looking we're looking kind of weak here. Then Holmes came yesterday, Wednesday, and if you can, maybe people have seen, he did say intervening is not going to be helpful. He actually sort of made it sound like everything was going okay. He said, well, it was a little slow, but now they're letting us in, and he put a very positive spin. And not only were the journalists like, this is ridiculous. He sort of fell under fire from journalists. Not that that matters, but the U.S. I know for a fact that the U.S. mission was outraged by the happy face that Holmes put on the situation. Yeah. And what was amazing today. Sorry, Mark. I don't mean to.
No, sorry. No, go on.
Do I have the responsibility to protect? Must I?
No.
Okay.
I'm good. Go on.
That literally today, and the U.S. let some of its outrage be known, and that they had communicated to Holmes. Mm-hmm. And today, at today's briefing, it was like night and day. Holmes used the word, isolated regime. It was like, and so it struck me like the thing is that you got to have some principles. It's nothing changed. If anything, things were a little bit better on Thursday than Wednesday, although both days are terrible. But it didn't become a regime on Thursday instead of Wednesday. It strikes me as a cynic or as an observer, the U.S. read him the Riot Act and gave him a memo, and suddenly he's singing from a different hymnal. But that's, again, this is all, I'm sure, way too inside baseball. There's a problem, aid must get in. Mm-hmm. But it's not, I've actually, because in writing about it, monitored like CNN, BBC, even Al Jazeera. Yeah. It's really interesting. I wish I spoke Chinese, not that what they'd say would be any more objective, but there's different views.
No, I agree. So Matthew, I said we have to cut it short. So I'll let you pick the next topic. Do you want to do Capital Master Plan or DRC, and then
DRC because Capital Master Plan we'll have with us for the next 5 years, Mark.
We'll be doing this well into our old age. I think. Yeah, we'll be talking about renovations at the UN
from other locations. I'll finally have a better backdrop than different. A scandal has broken.
Scandal has broken in the peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Correct. And in this case, the scandal breakers are eminently credible. They consist of the British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC, and Human Rights Watch, and both organizations are pretty outraged at the UN. And it's not this was a kind of a long time brewing. The BBC had run a report about 6 months ago, saying, based on Human Rights Watch on the ground DRC reporting or speaking with sources, that a contingent of peacekeepers in the Democratic Republic of the Congo from Pakistan had engaged in the trading of gold and guns. And what this was is in the Kivu, in eastern Congo, where they were disarming militias. The allegation was that at least some part of the battalion there gave the rebels the guns back in exchange for gold because the soil was very rich. And this is obviously it's apples and oranges, but that's a pretty damning allegation because the whole goal of peacekeeping there was to disarm the militias and reduce violence. If you're giving the guns back to the killers, it's a problem. And the UN, and I know that Jane Hall-Lute, she came out and she said zero tolerance, we're looking into it. They said at the time, yes, they'd found that some Pakistani peacekeepers had helped an Indian businessman, believe it or not. So there was a diplomatic aspect here to come and buy gold in the Congo, and that the three of them had been sent back to Pakistan. Even on the face of it, UN peacekeeping today can't tell you that any of the three were ever disciplined for essentially helping in the robbing of natural resources from a war-torn area.
Disciplined in the sense of repatriated or
they were sent home. There was no discipline.
So they were sent back to Pakistan.
They were sent back, but they
can't tell you if Pakistani authorities prosecuted
They've sent a, quote, note verbal. They wrote a letter to Pakistan and said, please tell us that you've imposed some discipline, and Pakistan has explicitly refused to respond. Because they feel they don't have it.
But DPKO, the peacekeeping department, did kick them out, right?
Well, no, Pakistan agreed to take them home. I have to just say, in terms of the crimes that we're talking about, providing weapons to rebels to kill civilians, or rape, is going home enough? It's nice to go home, right? Maybe you're right.
Yeah, well, we circle back to this a long time. It's clearly not enough.
Right.
I think the other two options are court-martialing them in the field, or somehow giving peacekeeping troops contingent upon signing an agreement to prosecute peacekeepers that have gone errant. Mm-hmm. The problem with the former is that sort of which body of law do you use? Like the Congolese military martial law might not sort of be sort of up to human rights standards.
I'm pretty sure under any law, giving weapons to rebels to kill civilians.
Oh no, it's clearly bad. It's
right.
clearly like a
no, I know what you mean. No, you're right.
We've
trod that ground. I don't mean to take cheap shots at them for those three because that's absolutely the least of it.
Yeah.
And here was the thing: is that after the UN did that. And I heard this has been brewing. I mean, I'd spoken. I know some of the people involved in the reporting, and this has been. They gave the UN every opportunity to rebut this. They let Mr. Gayno see the charges. They let the OIOS, the head of the Office of Internal Oversight Services, Inga Britt Elenius, because they were sent. OIOS was sent to the field to do these investigations. And essentially, just to jump forward, what was reported. The recent breaking scandal is much more damning because it points to the investigation having been done, having been a whitewash. And this is because Human Rights Watch was able to get actually the witness statements. And BBC was actually able to get into a Congolese jail in Kinshasa and interview the rebel leaders who continue to state that they gave gold and got guns from the UN. So the problem that's arisen is it's called into question not only what these two battalions. There's an Indian battalion that's alleged to have traded rations for guns, gotten ivory, used a UN helicopter to fly and meet the rebels. And the rebels they were meeting with, by the way, were not even Congolese rebels. These are Rwanda genocidaires. They're the FDLR. And it's very and the thing about it is that, again, I want to say this is not like this is not I don't want to put down inner city press. This is BBC after 6 months. And this is Human Rights Watch not just saying we're Human Rights Watch, believe us. They got the witness witness statements that the UN had. They have, and it's called. The problem is this, and I could go through with that. There's an internal memo from OIOS about the Indian battalion saying there are very serious questions. We really have to look into this. And then, like days later, there's a memo saying we've cleared the battalion. And it's just impossible to believe that the allegations listed in the first memo could have even been in any way legitimately reviewed by the second one.
So what do you think sort of the fallout will be from this?
The problem is there's
it's sort of emerging right now.
Exactly. And this points to a structural problem that I think we can when this OIOS was set up, this Office of Internal Oversight Services, it was set up so it's not directly under the Secretariat. And the idea is because it must be independent in order to investigate the Secretariat. The problem is that these also released, and as Inner City Press we played a role in this and put it online, are two audits of OIOS itself, saying that it's out of control, saying that it has a culture, a culture of impunity and cover-up, very damning stuff. And the problem is, I asked Ban Ki-moon. He did a stakeout. He came before the press, and I said to him, in light of these Congo, disclosures, what are you going to do about peacekeeping and about OIOS? And he said, I can't do anything about OIOS. It's a creature of the General Assembly, and it's up to them. He also said, we already looked into the Congo, which many people thought was kind of, because they've painstakingly pointed out that the previous report was a whitewash. But the problem with OIOS is, so who's in charge, right? If, in this case, they're very damning audits. What if an audit came out saying Inga Britt Elenius has stolen $100 million from the UN? That's hypothetical. We have I'm just saying, there's nobody, Ban Ki-moon couldn't say she's fired, right? The General Assembly could, but who is the General Assembly? I've asked the spokesman for the president. He can't on his own authority do it. The General Assembly actually doesn't meet all the time, right? They come in, we're going to wait till September. So the fallout, I think that in a way the UN, it might, sadly, despite the graph, and the thing is, it's not just to rub people's nose in it. It's that this is it. It has to be fixed. If the investigators are not legitimately investigating the micro scandals that not micro, the various scandals that happen to come up because it's a big organization and things happen and blah blah blah, if the investigations are not credible, it's never going to improve. And we're going to keep arguing. You're going to keep saying we do the best we can, and Jane Hall-Lute, and I mean this goes to the heart of the credibility of it. And so something has to be done. But I have to say it's unclear if Ban Ki-moon, and I think there's where she needs to show leadership. He has a way out. He has wiggle room. He could say I don't have to do anything about it. But if he came in as the man that would like clean the UN up and make it more credible, to say I don't know. And now today's in Atlanta. He's, by the way, he'll be in Atlanta tomorrow as well. Just so you know, as you watch TV images of Myanmar, a previously scheduled attempt to get to know the American people.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. We have to cut this one short, but let's talk at length
Sure.
maybe the week after next.
Okay, no, absolutely. And I'm sorry that we started a little late. It was only due to the responsibility to protect. You know?
Well, and you were gathering useful information.
I know.
That
I'm giving it to you,
with everyone.
Live and direct.
Thank you again. Let's talk the week after next.
Okay,
and
excellent.
We'll go for a long time and cover lots of topics. Thanks.
Okay, great.
All right,
Bye.
bye.